So, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us again for another lesson of A Course in Miracles. This is the 39th week, and as in our tradition, I'm going to read the 39th lesson from A Course in Miracles. And the 39th lesson says, "My holiness is my salvation. My holiness is my salvation." And I'm going to actually read paragraphs 3 through 4. In A Course in Miracles, it says, "We have already said that your holiness is the salvation of the world. What about your own salvation? You cannot give what you do not have. A savior must be saved. How else can he teach salvation? Today's exercises will apply to you. Recognizing that your salvation is crucial to the salvation of the world. As you apply the exercises to your world, the whole world stands to benefit. Your holiness is the answer to every question that were ever asked, is being asked now, or will be asked in the future. Your holiness means the end of guilt and therefore the end of hell. Your holiness is the salvation of the world and your own. How could you, to whom your holiness belongs to, be excluded from it? God does not know unholiness. Can it be he does not know his son? So Jesus right here, Jesus is saying your holiness is the salvation of the world, not only the world though, but also your own. So for everyone who is new to the group, as you know, we do a lesson a day from A Course in Miracles. And by doing this, we are embarking on a process of deprogramming our minds from guilt and ego to love and joy and peace and creativity and forgiveness. So it is through this process, this daily study, every lesson, and applying the practical applications that we embark on this journey. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to talk to me, and we can talk about how we're going through this process. So I am very excited, y'all. I say this every week. I'm very excited that this evening we will be continuing our conversation about life after life topics. The last week we met, we learned that our loved ones are never really lost to us, right? When they transition from the physical plane to the spiritual plane. And in fact, they are often all around us as we live our daily lives. So today we're going to delve even deeper into our life after life experiences as the divine sparks of light that we are. This is our truth. This is our truth. Let me let everyone in on a secret. So let me share a secret with everybody. We are not our bodies. We're not our bodies. We have agreed, right, to forget the truth of who we are so that we can come into this experience and only to remember again. And it is that remembering, that process of understanding and recognizing that which we are, that is so joyful. It is that process of remembering that gives us so much joy. To think that we are insignificant, that we are separate from God, that we were born in sin, because a lot of us were told that, right? Only to find that we are God and that it is us who have agreed to come to this planet at this time to share our gifts with the universe. That God experiences life in these bodies through us. Acknowledge the excitement that you feel in your heart when you hear these words, that we chose to be here and that we are powerful creators. Many, many, many truths, y'all, have been hidden from us. They've been kept away from us. But now is the time of enlightenment. Too long have we stumbled in the dark. So now we can recognize our light and walk on solid footing. We are individuations of God. We are created by our source. So we are the created creators. And in understanding that we were made in the image of God, we are dynamic, layered beings who create in every moment, whether we know it or not. Ignorance does not keep us from creating. Just because we don't know that we create doesn't mean that we don't create. And a lot of times, if we create unconsciously, then we create an unhappy dream, right? Because we're unconsciously creating. So this process is about us creating consciously. So this evening, we're going to explore other aspects of who we are. We're going to talk about things that we all think about, but never really discuss. And this discussion leads to healing because we begin to recognize how very big and marvelous we all are. We've been taught, guys, to attribute goodness and holiness and power to a being outside of us. But our Course in Miracles lesson tonight tells us that we are holy. And not only that we are holy, that our holiness saves the world, but it saves us as well. These words come straight from Jesus. So let's investigate this holiness that we have. Let's explore the magnitude of that which we are. So last week we talked about that our loved ones visiting us in our dreams and interacting with us by sending us indications that they are around us. We talked about that. So what exactly happens to all of us when our souls decide to exit this physical plane? We acknowledge that if we go to a funeral and we know that that body, our loved one, is not in that body. So where is that energy? What happens as we embark on this if we don't die, right? If you had the pleasure of listening to anyone who has had a near-death experience, you understand that there is a whole dimension that is available to us when we shed our bodies, that our consciousness continues and we continue to learn and grow and have a myriad of experiences. And we learn that this physical life that we have in these bodies, in fact, is an illusion. The intention of today's session is to collectively release our fear of death and to release any suffering that we may have about the belief that our loved ones suffered when they transitioned. Now is the time to release any burdens that is hindering us from raising our vibrations. Everyone listening to this message, I invite you to step into your power. Release every worry, every guilt, every grudge, or any heaviness that you are carrying. Give it up to God and open yourselves up to the truth of who you are, of who we all are. And it is this truth that will set us free. It is this truth, my fellow light beings, that will set us free from fear, depression, and all other forms of poverty that hold us back. So let's venture into those experiences. Okay, so Dolores Cannon, I don't know if anybody on the call has heard of Dolores Cannon. She is a pioneer of hypnotherapy, and she developed her own hypnosis courses called Quantum Healing Hypnosis Techniques. It's called QHHT for short, of which I am a student of. So I've been taught by her courses. So I am honored to share from one of her many books tonight that talk about the life after life experiences. I'm going to begin by reading from her book titled Between Death and Life. So in this book, similar to Michael Newton, Dolores regresses her clients to view past and future lives. And she also spoke with them about their experiences in between their incarnations. Because again, we're dynamic beings. We're more than our bodies. This is not our first lifetime. Many, many truths have been kept out of the Bible because they didn't want people to understand that if you don't get it right this lifetime, you have an opportunity to try again. So a lot of information has been withheld from us. It's a lot of truth in there, but a lot has been omitted. So I am going to read from this book written by Dolores Cannon. I'm going to start on page 5. Again, the book is titled Between Death and Life, and she starts out talking about the quote unquote death experiences. And it reads, she says, the most common descriptions I have found of the moment when death occurs is that there is a feeling of coldness. And then suddenly the spirit is standing by the side of the body or by the side of the bed or wherever, looking at their body, okay? They usually can't understand why the other people in the room are so upset because they feel so wonderful. The overall sensation is one of exhilaration rather than dread. The following is a description of the moment of release by a woman in her 80s who was dying of old age. It is an example that is typical and constantly repeated. So now Dolores is she's regressed a client, and the client has viewed a past lifetime. So, and so in that process, she asks the client questions as they are viewing their past lifetimes, but they really think that they are that person in the previous lifetime. So Dolores starts out and says, "You lived a long time, didn't you?" And the subject says, yes. I move slow. Takes so long. There's not much joy anymore. I am so tired. So then Dolores is speaking to the reader. She says, since she was obviously experiencing discomfort because clients do that. If they're regressed, whatever happens in the past lifetime, they feel it. So she said because she was experiencing discomfort, I moved her ahead in time until the death was over. When I finished counting, the subject's entire body jerked on the bed, and she suddenly smiled. Her voice was full of life, nothing that even resembled the weary tones of only a moment before. I feel free. I'm light. She sounded so pleased. So then Dolores asked her a question. She says, "Can you see the body?" And the subject is disgusted. She says, "Oh, that old thing? It's down there. I had no idea I looked so bad. I was so wrinkled and shriveled. I feel too good to be that shriveled. It was all wore out." And she started to making sounds of delight. The client was. She says, "Oh, I'm so glad. I'm just so glad I'm here." And so Dolores says she could hardly keep from laughing because the expression of the subject was so different from when she was dying. And so Dolores asked, "No wonder it was shriveled. That body lived many years. That's probably why it died. You said you are here. Where are you?" And the subject says, "I'm in the light." And oh, it feels so good. I feel intelligent. I feel peace. I feel calm. I don't need anything. And Dolores asks, "What are you going to do now?" And the subject says, "They tell me I've got to go and rest. Oh, I hate to rest when I've got so much to do." And Dolores asks, "Do you have to rest if you don't want to?" And the subject says, "No, but I don't feel like I want to be cramped again. I want to grow and learn." And then Dolores narrates that after this, she was unable to get any more answers from her except that she was floating. She says, "I could tell by her expression and her breathing that she was in the resting place. When a subject goes there, it is as if they have drifted into a deep sleep and they don't want to be disturbed. It is useless to try to question them because their answers will be incoherent." So we have mentioned before that a lot of times the soul thinks that the body is just very unattractive. Here we read that as soon as this elderly woman shed her body, she felt amazing. And she could not relate to how the body looked at all. This is a common response that the soul has when it views the body after it transitions. So now I'm going to continue, y'all, on page 10, where Dolores is speaking with another client. So she, this time, she's talking to a client who has regressed to a previous lifetime where she was a little girl. So it says, another example concerns a little girl who died at the age of 9. When I first began speaking to her, she was going on a hayrack ride to a school picnic in the 1800s. There was a creek near where the picnic would be held, and the others would be going swimming. She could not swim very well and was afraid of the water, but she didn't want the other children to know it for fear they would make fun of her. So since some of the others had fishing poles, she had decided she would pretend to fish. so no one would know she couldn't swim. The little girl was really worrying about it and was not enjoying the hayride at all. I told her to move forward to an important day when she was older. When I finished counting, she announced happily, "I'm not there anymore. I'm in the light." This was a surprise, so I asked what had happened. And so the subject says, "I couldn't swim. The dark just closed in on me. I felt my chest burning, and then I just came out into the light, and it didn't matter anymore." So Dolores asked her, "Do you think the creek was deeper than you thought?" And the subject says, "I don't think it was that deep. I got real scared. I think my knees just folded up and I couldn't stand up. I was just scared." And so Dolores says, "Do you know where you are?" And the subject says in a childlike voice, "I'm in forever." And Dolores asks, "Is anybody with you?" And the subject says, "They're working. They're all busy contemplating what they have to do. I'm trying to get the hang of everything." And so Dolores says, "Do you think you've ever been to this place before?" And the subject says, "Yes, it's very peaceful here. But I'll go back. I must overcome fear. Fear is something you bring on, and it is paralyzing. I don't really think the water was deep. I think I doubled up because of my fear. The worst thing that can happen usually isn't near as bad as what we fear." And she says now her voice sounded more mature. And the subject continues and says, "It's a monster in man's mind, and fear only affects those on earth. It's the carnal mind. The spirit is left unaffected." And so Dolores asks, "Do you think when people are afraid of things that they draw it to them?" And the subject says, "Oh, yes, you bring those things upon yourself. Thought is energy. It is creative and it makes things happen." And so I want to camp out on this for a little bit. She says, thought is energy. It is creative and it makes things happen. So we are the created creators I mentioned, right? And we have three very powerful levels of creation available to us in this dimension. Here we see the soul asserting that. And we've talked about this before, and it's very important that we understand exactly how we create. So our first level of creation is thought, which is why I often tell people to monitor your thoughts and do not follow a stream of mental consciousness that is not serving you. It is created. The second and more powerful level of creation is our speech. And if you think a thought and believe it to the point where you speak it, well, you are manifesting that thought. You are speaking it, which is why during conversation among friends, someone may say, "Girl, don't speak that in the universe." Because on a conscious or unconscious level, that person knows that their speech is powerful. And finally, the third and most powerful level of creation is our actions, which is the physical demonstration of that belief. So we are powerful creators. And this is reiterated by this particular soul. So I'm going to continue. So she says, "It's easy to see how another person's fears can be silly. and unimportant. And you think, why would they be afraid of that? Yet when it's your fear, it's so deep and so personal and so touching, and it just engulfs you. She says, so if I can look at other people's fears and try to help them understand theirs, I think somewhere along those lines, it would help me understand the ones I had. And so Dolores says that makes a lot of sense. You know, one of the biggest fears people have is that they are afraid of dying. And the subject says, that's not so bad. That's the easiest thing I'll ever do. It's like the end of all confusion until you start all over again. And then it's more confusion. And then Dolores says, then why do people keep coming back? And the subject says, you must complete the cycle. You must learn all and overcome all the things of the world so that you can enter into perfection. So here, now we are beginning to venture into the reality that the death of the body is nothing to fear. Tonight, we're releasing those fears, guys. At the end of the day, we get to the point where there's nothing that's holding us back energetically. It's ready. We're ready to fly at this point. It's time for us to step into our power. So we're releasing all of the fears that we have attached to that. So let's delve deeper into that topic. I'm going to go on page 14. And I'm reading from pages 14 to 15. It says, in another case, I speak to a man who had just died in an avalanche. I asked him what it was like to die. So the subject says, have you dived into a deep pool to where it's dark and murky at the bottom? As you come back up towards the surface of the water, it gets lighter and lighter. That when you break through the surface of the water, there's sunlight all around. He says death was like that. And Dolores says, do you think it was like that because of the way you died, with the rocks falling on you? And the subject says, no. It was like that because I was going from the physical plane to the spiritual plane. As I left my body, it was like coming up through the pool. Then when I reached the spiritual plane, it was like breaking the surface of the water and coming out into sunlight. If you die in an accident, physically it is painful just before you lose consciousness of the physical plane because your body has been injured. But after you lose consciousness, it is very easy and natural. It's as natural as anything else in life. Making love, walking, running, swimming. It is just another part of life. There's no such thing as dying. You just go on to a different stage of your life. Dying is pleasant, he says. If people are worried about it, tell them to go to a place in the river that has a deep pool. Tell them to dive down to the bottom of the pool, and then at the bottom, push up vigorously with their feet and come plunging up to the surface. Tell them it is like that. So then Dolores says, I think many people are worried that death will be painful. And the subject says, death is not painful unless that you have need of pain. For the most part, there is no pain unless it is wished for. It can be extremely painful if you wish it to be, or if you feel you have need of it in order to teach you a lesson. But you can separate yourself from that at all times. And this is available no matter how connected you are with what is going on. It is available to everyone. The separation of the body and soul during this time of pain. So we read that this client asserts that death is not a painful event, and that the soul, it has a choice whether it to experience that pain or not. I'm going to continue. Dolores says, but the actual death itself, the leaving of the body, is that painful? And he says, no, the transition is one of ease rather than of duress. Pain comes from the body. The spirit feels no pain except remorse. That is really the only pain that a spirit can feel. A feeling that they could have done something more. This is painful, but physical pain is no longer has meaning because that was left with the body. And so Dolores asks, is it possible to leave the body before actual death occurs and let the body suffer the pain? And the subject says, yes, the person has that choice, whether or not they want to stay there and go through it, or if they want to leave and just watch. That is an option that is open to everyone. Dolores says, I personally think it would be easier, especially if it was going to be a traumatic death. And the subject says, this is strictly up to the individual. So now we see that a soul has a choice to separate from the body during a traumatic death event. And we talked about this during our last session, that a lot of people may be suffering, thinking that their loved ones, died a very painful death. And it's not true. If that soul did not want to experience that pain, we have a choice. We are powerful beings of light. We are in a realm of free will. It's all about what it is we choose to experience. So now I'm going to continue on page 16, where Dolores recounts where a client was burned at the stake in a past lifetime. Yes, human beings have done awful things to each other throughout history. So I don't know if this was like during the Salem witch trials or whatever, but this client was burned at the stake, and the client said that her soul jumped out of her body. So I'm going to read on page 16. It says, in my work, I have come across examples of this. In one regression, a young woman was being burned at the stake for her beliefs while the whole town watched. She was terrified, but was also very angry at the bigoted people who were responsible for this. As the flames leaped higher, she decided she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her suffer. So she left the body and watched from a hovering position above the scene. But there, much to her chagrin and aggravation, she saw her body screaming as it went through the agonies of burning to death. In this case, it was obvious that the body and the spirit were two separate things. I think it would be very reassuring and comforting to people who have lost loved ones in a violent, horrible way to know that they probably did not even experience the most traumatic part of the death. It makes a great deal of sense to realize that the spirit would not want to remain in the body and experience all that pain. Therefore, the spirit removes itself and the body is merely reacting spontaneously. Much in the same way that we react when we cut or burn ourselves accidentally. We yell and pull our hand away. This is not a conscious reaction, but an involuntary one. Thus, it would appear that during a horrible death, the body is merely reacting, while the real personality has vacated and is watching from the sidelines. So Dolores goes deep. Like, this book, y'all, goes so deep. But again, we see that it is the choice of the soul whether or not to experience pain. And isn't that all true of all of our experiences as incarnated spirits? That we always have the choice with whether or not to experience pain during an event in our lives. We can allow an occurrence to overcome us and drown in anger, sadness, and depression, fear, or whatever. Or we can allow ourselves to grieve the loss of whatever has happened, because that is important as well, to give yourself that time, but then to decide to view it from a higher perspective. We can take a deep breath and remember that nothing happens outside of the will of God. And so if it happened, there was something to be gained from it. There is always a higher reason and a soul level choice, always. So Dolores actually proves this point further on page 20. So I'm going to read a paragraph on page 20. She says, when people are on the spirit side, they make a plan before they re-enter the karmic wheel called Earth. It is a plan of what they hope to accomplish during the next life. They also make contracts with other souls that are going to be important for them to interact with during the upcoming lifetime. She says also a part of this contract is their exit plan. Everyone plans the way they will leave or exit this present lifetime. I have found that no one ever dies until it is their time to die. There are no such thing as accidents. It was just the manner chosen for the soul to exit. When the soul has completed what it came to accomplish, it is time to move to the next phase of their existence. I have found that it is possible to delay the death for a short period of time. However, when it is the appointed time, the spirit chooses to leave. Of course, the conscious mind of the person has no memory of this part of the plan. Because when we come into this life, the veil of forgetfulness comes down and all memory of the spirit side is removed. They said one time, it would not be a test if you knew the answers. So we have to remain consciously oblivious to our soul plans. So this whole experience, we decided to embark on this experience. And this veil of forgetfulness, I've heard many, many times before, where when we are in the process of being born, we forget that which we are. Remember, I talked about we forget just so that we can remember again and have this delicious experience of understanding that we are God. everything is in divine timing, right? There are no accidents. So again, we can release that thought that, so and so passed away, this shouldn't have happened. If that soul wanted to exit at that particular time, to us in form, it's tragic, right? But on the soul level, it's perfect. It was what they agreed to do before we came in. And understanding that we don't really lose our loved ones, understanding things from a spiritual perspective, understanding that which we are allows us to relieve that suffering. And then you can have a level of comprehension, like, okay, it's okay. Everything is okay. Another subject actually reiterates what we discussed during our last session, which was that energy never dies. So on page 27, a subject talks about that we are energy. So the subject says, some people think that there is no life after death. And then she starts laughing. She says, but once something exists, the energy, which is that existence, cannot be destroyed. And we talked about that, where even scientists acknowledge that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It only changes form. She says, why is it so hard to believe that there is existence after the death of a physical body? You cannot destroy something like electricity because the energy is always there, although in a different form. Why do they think that a human spirit and soul can be destroyed when energy cannot? That is what the human soul is. Nothing but energy. She says, for the soul is not merely a thing which is residing within the physical body. It is an energy. And as an energy, it can propagate as energies are and want to do. The correct perception of your personality would be as energy, for that is the essence of the truth of creation, that all energy is. And that we are all energy. So we, again, are hearing from different sources the same information, and that's the beauty of the truth. The truth never changes. You can go to a science book, you can go to Dolores Cannon's book, you can go to Michael Newton's book, you can go to many different sources and understand that the truth does not change. So, okay, so now we know that once we shed our bodies, we are in this peaceful place of all knowing, right? So now we have transitioned to the other side, right? So now what? What happens? Well, we then encounter what is known as greeters. And greeters are souls who will come to you to help guide you to the light, so to speak. Because some people, some souls, it depends on how the body dies, can be kind of confused. If it's a sudden death, some souls don't realize where they are, or even if you died a very peaceful death and you knew the death was coming, it's important to have what they call greeters. So I'm going to, and this is juicy, y'all. I love this kind of stuff. So on page 23, I'm going to talk about where a subject talks about this on page 23. So it says, after dying, There seems to be a period of confusion for some spirits. All do not experience this. Much of it depends upon the manner of death, whether it was natural or sudden and unexpected. The main thing that I found is the assurance that one is never alone after going through the death experience. Again, this is to raise our vibration and to understand that our loved ones who have shed their bodies are not alone. They're not in a dark room alone. Okay? So the subject says, there's sometimes a period when you're not really sure where you are, whether you're on the physical plane or the spiritual plane, because some of the sensations are similar, yet they're different. And you're trying to figure out what is going on and where you are. There's a period of orientation or reorientation, which can be confusing to some as they figure out where they should go from here. And then he says, but they needn't worry because help is sent immediately. Usually a handful of souls will come that you have had close karmic connections with in former lifetimes. There's always one or two or even more on hand that are in between incarnations themselves. They will be there to greet you, and a person will recognize them due to his connection with them in the immediate past lifetime. So, and the subject continues to say that many desire for Jesus to greet them when they transition. And so she mentions this on page 24 through 25. So I'm going to read this. It says, some people believe that the form of Jesus' spirit will contact you to guide you at the time that your spirit leaves your body. It is entirely possible, however, not mandatory or in all cases. It is sometimes done if the individual crossing over requests or desires to see Jesus. And so it is, in fact, that Jesus would manifest itself to them, for he has so stated that his help shall be a part of this process. And it is there for anyone who would so choose to open themselves up to his energy, be they incarnate or not. This is also true for people of other beliefs or religions. If they have a deep, abiding belief in a particular entity, that spirit energy will be there for them to help ease the crossing if this is what they desire. So, yeah, we already know. I have already asked Jesus to greet me at the gates, okay, when I cross over. All right, him and my grandmama, just so we can know. So I got my request in queue. So I wanted to read, I'm almost done. I wanted to read from Michael Newton's book titled Journey of Souls, and it's not going to be long, y'all, where he also talks about this subject. He calls it the homecoming, right? So he, so there's a client that's talking about the homecoming where he regrets the client into his or her death in a past lifetime, and he talks about what happens. This is gonna be fun. So I'm gonna read on page 27. It says, I find that usually guides are somewhere in close proximity, monitoring the incomer's arrival in their own way. The soul in my next case has just come through the spiritual gateway and is met by an advanced entity who obviously had close connections with the subject over a prolonged series of past lives. Although this soulmate entity is not my client's primary guide, He is there to welcome and provide loving encouragement for her. So I'm going to read. So Dr. Newton asks the client, what do you see around you? And the client says, it's as if I'm drifting along on pure white sand, which is shifting around me. And I'm under a giant beach umbrella with brightly colored panels, all vaporized, but banded together too. And Dr. Newton says, is anyone here to meet you? And the client says, I thought I was alone, but in the distance, a light moving fast towards me. Oh my gosh. And Dr. Newton says, what is it? And the client is excited. Uncle Charlie, I'm over here. And Dr. Newton says, why does this particular person come to meet you first? And then the subject says, Uncle Charlie, I've missed you so much. So at this point, the client is not listening to Dr. Newton because she in her experience. And so he repeats the question. And then she answers and said, because of all my relatives, I loved him more than anybody. He died when I was a child, and I never got over it. And so she was referring to a lifetime on a farm in her immediate past life. And so Dr. Newton says, how do you know it's Uncle Charlie? Does his features allow you to recognize him? And the subject says, and she's squirming in her chair, sure. Just as I remember him, jolly, kind, lovable, he is next to me. And Dr. Newton said, what is so funny? And she says, Uncle Charlie is just as fat as he used to be. And Dr. Newton says, and what does he do next? And she says, he is smiling and holding out his hand to me. And the doctor says, does this mean he has a body of some sort with hands? And she laughs. She says, well, yes and no. I'm floating around, and so is he. It's in my mind. He is showing all of himself to me. And what I am most aware of is his hand stretched out to me. And so the doctor says, why is he holding out his hand to you in a materialized way? And she says, to comfort me, to lead me further into the light. And he says, and what do you do? And she says, I'm going with him, and we're thinking about the good times we spent together, playing in the hay on the farm. And Dr. Newton says, and is he letting you see all this in your mind so you will know who he is? And the client says, yes, as I knew him in my last life, so I won't be afraid. He knows I'm still a little shocked over my death. The subject had died suddenly in an automobile accident. So Dr. Newton says, then right after death, no matter how many deaths we may have experienced in our lives, it is possible to be a little fearful until we get used to the spirit world again. And the subject says, it's not really fear. That's wrong. More like apprehensive, maybe. It varies for me each time. The car crash caught me unprepared. I'm still a little mixed up. And so Dr. Newton says, all right, so let's go forward a bit more. What is Uncle Charlie doing now? And she says, he is taking me to the place I should go. And the doctor says, on the count of 3, let's go there. 1, 2, 3. Tell me what is happening. And the subject says, there are other people around, and they look friendly as I approach. They seem to want me to join them. And the doctor says, continue to move towards them. Do you get the impression they might be waiting for you? And she says, yes. In fact, I realize I've been with them before. No, don't go. And doctor says, what is happening now? She says, Uncle Charlie is leaving me. Why is he going away? And the doctor stops the dialogue and calms her down using techniques. And then he asks, are you more relaxed now? And you must realize why Uncle Charlie is leaving you at this point. And she says, yes, he stays in a different place than I do. He just came to meet me, to bring me here. And the doctor says, I think I understand. Uncle Charlie's job was to be the first person to meet you after your death and see you were okay. I'd like to know if you feel better now and more at home. And the subject says, yes, I do. That's why Uncle Charlie has left me with the others. So in this particular case, the client's uncle met her, and as we read, he was the perfect person to greet her because she was very excited to see him. It made her feel comfortable and safe. So this is only scratching the surface to the very layers of who we are. We can't cover all of our layers in one session. So we will be continuing our life after life conversations in our next session. Next week we will be discussing school and classes and learning. Yes, we continue to learn on the other side and master our talents and skills. So absolutely continue to tune in and see what else we got going on the other side. So my question is to everyone, has what we learned today, right, from Dolores Cannon and Michael Newton and all these subjects, has it impacted your perceptions of our transition from form to spirit? Did anyone hear anything that surprised them? Did you hear anything new? Was it like, oh my God, I've never, thought about that? So I'm gonna figure out, y'all, how to unmute everybody. So whoever wants to share, if it's not time for you to share, just stay muted. But does anybody want to share anything? Do you have any impressions? Are you surprised by anything? I'm going to read what the chat says. It says, so Sophia said, hey. Brittany said, hi. Charlotte, hi everyone, I'm Charlotte. Okay, so Takia says she loves this topic so much. Me too, Takia. And Brittany said, absolutely. So does anybody have anything to share, y'all?
Yeah, I do. I think that what's interesting is that most of the times in religion, they try to inject fear. So when you said that the spirit or the soul doesn't feel anything, then how would you, quote unquote, go to hell? You understand? So there's no feeling. So how would you feel fire or brimstone or any of those things? So they're just trying to, I guess, change your focal point to that wholeness, like you being whole and being holy in a sense. So it's interesting.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, absolutely. It's the truth that'll set us free, right? It's the truth that will set us free. There is no hell. We're going to delve into that. We can send ourselves to hell, But it's us who can, if somebody dies and they, they feel like they're not a good person or whatever, we are creators, right? We can send ourselves to a hell. But even that is temporary.
Yeah.
Even that is temporary. A lot of times it's just a thought that they can have and say, okay, I'm tired of this, or how long am I going to be here? Or, I need somebody. And then somebody appears, a spirit God appears. So, but you're right, in terms of any kind of judgment from God, there is none. And we've gone up and through that whole topic. We read from a book called Conversations with God that talks about, there's no such thing as hell. So thank you for that, Desmond.
Indeed.
Yes. Is there anybody else? Does anybody else have anything to share? Okay, so everybody else is muted. Margaret, you're unmuted. Can you talk?
I don't really have much to say other than what this conversation has taught me is it relieves the fear of dying.
Yes.
It removes the fear. And I think once it removes the fear, it opens you up to live your life really to the fullest. If you have no fear, you can step into anything that you want to.
Right.
And I think that's important for everyone. Yeah, and as far as the gentleman, what's his name again?
Desmond.
As Desmond mentioned with going to hell, it's all about the people, as you said, who believe in hell. It's a vibrational aspect. If you believe in it, you will match that vibration, and that is what you will experience. And as you said, it will only take a second for you to change your mind and say, no, this is not, no. And you will find instantly that you will get into that space where you really belong. But it's all about your thought process, your vibration. You're just matching your vibration to your belief. And basically, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Margaret. Very well spoken. So, okay, I'm not going to, Joan, did you unmute yourself? Did you want to share anything?
Yes, I kind of just want to add on as far as the fear of death, especially if you experience, I don't know if everybody can hear me well, but especially if you experience loved ones who have transitioned, just kind of knowing that after we outgrow this body that we live in, there is something else that happens. There is something else to look forward to. There is another experience in which clearly we already have experienced before, which is how we were transitioned into our current shell. So there's a lot of thoughts that goes into it, which is why I will hope that we cherish the moment, kind of living in today and changing our perspective to, as you said, raise our vibration, opposed to staring the other way, because heaven is what we see, is our perception, is our views, is what we look, when we look outside, what do we see? How do we find the beauty in nature? So it's what you create for yourself and what you would like for yourself. And within that, you can find the happiness. And in that, you won't have the fear of the unknown, because you're fearing something that you don't know what will happen in the afterlife. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Wise words, wise words. Absolutely. It is all about our vibration. Absolutely. And in
but I'll add to that as well, that in my experience, I have seen personally people that I've known that has come to me after they transition, and the perception that I see that they created for me to see them has always been in a happy place. It hasn't been in a nightmare. It hasn't been in something that looked ugly. It was something always I seen as beautiful. So that's just speaking from my own personal experience of people who have, that I've known who have transitioned.
Love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Anybody else? Everybody doesn't have to share. I just hope that this did encourage all of us, right? Because we are shedding those things that weigh us down so that we are continually raising our vibration. So I love everyone. Rebecca, did you unmuted yourself? Did you want to share anything?
I was just going to say that I experienced passing with my grandmother. She shared it with me while she was passing.
Oh, wow.
And it was a really phenomenal experience. She was in a hospital bed, but she heard singing. She thought I was singing.
Wow.
She's like, wow, that's beautiful singing. She said there were candles all around her, and all of her dogs were around her. And she, at one point she said, oh, Grandpa's right there. Grandpa's across the river there. Do you see him? My grandfather had passed like 5 years before she did. And so he was waiting for her. And so that just connected with me when you were sharing that story. And then she kept saying, well, go to him. He's waiting for you. And she wasn't quite ready. And she wasn't like coherent in talking. She was just sharing these things as they came up. And I was curious. So I was asking questions as she saw stuff. And then at one point she said, there's a party upstairs. Can you hear the party? Everybody I know is up there. And so I just, and she used to say, like when her euphemism for dying was always, I'm going to go see the man upstairs. And so when she was talking about this party, it connected with me then. And I just said, that party's for you. Go upstairs, go upstairs. And then she just stopped breathing. And it was so peaceful. And I mean, I know she was having a huge party, but that took a lot of fear away from dying for me. Like that was definitive for me to let that I was honored that she shared that with me. It took about 5 days of her sharing all that, but it was like I was riveted.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was really beautiful.
That's beautiful, Rebecca. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. You were almost a hypnotherapist at that point. Asking questions, getting information. I love it.
Right. Well, that was the thing too, I think, because I was so curious. And as she would, because her eyes were closed and shallow breathing, and to everyone else who came in the room, she looked like she was unconscious. But then when it was just the two of us, she would say those, she would ask those questions. Oh, are you singing? It's so beautiful. It's the most beautiful singing I've ever heard. And so she attributed it all to me, but her eyes were closed. She looked like she was asleep, but she would. So then I just kept asking, like, what do you see? What do you hear? So
I love it. Thank you.
If you ever have that experience with someone, it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, I love it. So we're going to continue, y'all. We're going to continue delving deeper into that which we are and what we're doing on the other side and talents that we're working on and just our experience. So Margaret says in the chat, please mention everyone to stock up on extra food just in case. So it's been going around in the spiritual community to kind of stock up on extra food. We don't know where this dimension is going to be taking us. So that is also a good idea. Thank you so much, Margaret. And I will mention that. So I have mentioned that to everybody. So I love y'all. Love and light. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the newcomers, Joan, Desmond, Rebecca, I love it. Look at Charlotte. So thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all for joining.
Beautiful session as usual. I loved it.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you. So love y'all. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Talk to you later.
Good night, everyone. Good
Bye
night.
bye.